afternoon, everybody. My talk today is going to be a little bit about the 7 principles of spiritualism. We're a spiritualist mission. A lot of people might not know that spiritualism started in 1848 with the first ever communication between an ordinary person in spirit and an ordinary person on earth. The first medium who was communicated with this correct truth that somebody existed in the spirit realms who had a physical life. And that's the foundation of spiritualism. For a long time, spiritualism just focused on that, developing that communication and bringing that through. And there was a lot of diverse opinions about whether we should have principles or not. For many years, spiritualism, some resisted, some accepted. Two very different points of view. In 1854, the New Jersey spiritualists in their setup, in their original thing, said, all that spirit does is true, we survive beyond death. That's all there is to it. And yet, another organisation called the Society for the Diffusion of Knowledge of Spiritualism actually published a long list of about 3 pages of principles. The principles, well, it's interesting. The principles we use now, we use here, are the United Kingdom's Spiritualist National Union's 7 principles. If we were in America, quite likely we use the National Spiritualist Association of Churches 9 principles. America's got to have it bigger than us and bigger than other places, so they have 9 instead of 7. But there are others. There's one for the Christian Spiritualist Organisation, which is very much more, obviously, it sounds more Christian. We're a Spiritualist National Union type church, and we're not actually a Christian organisation. And we acknowledge the role of Christ as a healer, teacher and medium, but not as important as a saviour, because we feel we save ourselves. The basic parts of spiritualism. But the ones we follow were apparently handed down by, came through progressively through Emma Hardy Written, or put together over a number of years. And I found some which came from 1859, which is a lot earlier, by a man called A. E. Newton, who assembled them in England and published them in 1859. And there are 14 of them, they look a lot like our principles. So I'm not sure who created them and when they came in. We don't normally in this organisation, if you go to some, you'll find they read the 7 principles every time you arrive. And we don't. We rarely do talk about the principles. The nature of the version of spiritualism we follow here, we never use the traditional repetitive prayers that other churches of any denomination tend to do. Indeed, I tend to listen to the words of Silver Birch on this matter, that said prayers were of little, if any, value, and that what was spoken from the heart, or even unspoken, was more appropriate. Words repeated by rote, or read out at every meeting, tend to lose their true meaning, and the deeper feeling and meaning behind the words gets lost. However, our first 4 principles are the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, communion with spirits as ministering angels, and the continuous existence of the human soul. For completeness, it's worth remembering the other 3. So I'm going to talk about the first 4. The other 3 which appeared over those years. The 4th one, the next one is personal responsibility. We're responsible for all that we do or fail to do, all the acts we make, and all the acts we fail to make by our inaction. We've got compensation, I won't say retribution, because I don't like retribution. It sounds very much like old-fashioned religion. Hereafter for all the good or evil deeds done here. And the last one is a path of eternal progress, open to every human soul that wills to tread it by the path of eternal good. I don't say retribution because we don't really accept karma. We accept the view of a life review and return to spirit, where you sense and feel all that happened to you, all the good and bad things you did in your life, you'll feel and what have caused other people. I choose to look at the first 4 because they relate mainly to the actual status of our existence rather than the personal choices and the way we live our life. Clearly, the fatherhood of God reflects Victorian language, which expressed a particular relationship between ourselves and God the Parent. Within spiritualism, particularly in the words of Silver Birch, this becomes the Great Spirit. In the USA, it's taken to be a more abstract concept, that of the infinite intelligence, not actually being an intelligence, a being that exists, that we cannot even conceive of its nature, which is really where I tend to think about God. I know God's there, but I couldn't try and explain it. I've had my own guide say that even the elevated guides cannot explain God. They really cannot communicate with him. In all cases, it's meaning for the creator of everything within the universe, not just this planet. The force which imbues all things with its own spiritual energy. The brotherhood of man is a reflection that every person is a part of that great spirit. We all share a spark of the divine. There are no differences between us. We should not differentiate between. We shouldn't differentiate between race, tribe, sex or religion. We should all be treated as equals and respect each other on that basis. The third principle, communication with spirits as ministering angels, talks to the fact that we can have contact with the spirits of those who cross to the realms of spirit. The principle proclaims the fact that we can seek help and guidance from our spirit friends. The fourth principle tells of our continued existence as an individual identity within the world of spirit after our physical life ceases. That the essential core of us, our memories and distinct personality, continues to exist. It does not say we're suddenly providers of wisdom, just that we continue to exist. I'd like to return to remind those still living around that I am dying love. Occasionally come and have a visit the houses we built, just because we love them as well. This is a critical principle because this is the one we have since the start of modern spiritualism in March 1848, proved to be the cornerstone for the truth of spiritualism through the precepts of mediumship. Of themselves, they talk to our spiritual essence, even though we may differ about what that actually relates to. What within us is the spiritual essence, and what is God? Let us firstly look at the spirit. Even within spiritualism, there are different views. If we then expand this look at other religions, we find an amazing difference in ideas. I can create confusion by looking at many ideas. But spirit, for example, the spirit is created at conception. That the spirit chooses its time to enter and remain within the human embryo. That the spirit only arrives at the moment of birth, when some claim to see a silver cord entering the child. Or that the spirit links to the physical being at conception, but remains in one part of the spirit realm while visiting the physical being on a regular basis. I think that's a view, that last one, is a view or a belief that I hold. But I can't prove it's true. I can't prove that's the truth, whereas I can, as a medium, prove that other ones exist. I can add more confusion if you like. In some views, every spirit is new and there are no old or returning beings. Indeed, that's its extreme in the faithless movement, which grew out of spiritualism. And the people follow a book which was apparently written in trance by an ex-spiritualist. The book is the OAHSPE, which some people may know. It's the Bible, which was written this way. The thought of reincarnation is evil because it represents a discarnate spirit possessing a body destined for a new spirit. It's quite funny, I was on a wonderful book, book site on Google, Yahoo Groups. And it was run by a faithist. And we had to avoid any reference to reincarnation on there, all held by groups on the website. Because there was something evil turning up. In some views, the spirit is a newly separated facet of the spirit, or some kind of group souls. Others will claim that every spirit is reincarnated to continue a journey to some form of perfection or a chance to move to the higher realms of spirit. Theosophy said that. Emmanuel Blavatsky managed to get through 100 lifetimes somewhat faster than was practically termed if you look at when she was born and when she last came back, or she never came back. Then we may have others who would not rule out reincarnation if the spirit so chose, but would suggest there are other paths to development, a view which I personally hold, but a belief, if you like, that's unproven. It's a view that's been put together by Staten Moses guy in a spirit teaching, a book called Spirit Teachings. So many possibilities, reflective of ideas which can and are expressed as part of all religions in some form. However, we have not considered what the spirit is and where it resides whilst a part of the human existence. What is this force which is part of the spirit world before our physical birth, which enters our body to take part in this life and then returns to spirit as a differentiated entity with our character and our memory intact? In a wonderful piece of egotism, mankind frequently chooses to say it is our spirit that differentiates us from animals. Yet we are animals. The body, brain and intellect exist for the spirit to work with. Indeed, our physical abilities are almost certainly hard-coded within us, entangled within the genetic strands which are essential to our being. This DNA is part of a gift from our physical, not our spiritual ancestors. It is not part of our spirit. Indeed, because these gifts are ancestral, it's quite probable that our latent psychic abilities are encoded within the DNA we inherit from parents and grandparents. How often do we hear people claim to be the fourth or fifth generation psychics? Indeed, it is clear these skills can be inherited, but from the DNA, not from spirit. Clear difference. Very much of what and who we are comes from our parents. Our mental and physical skills, the DNA also encapsulates their memories. The genetic histories of our ancestors from all of those many years which have gone by. Clearly the human body, like any other animal body, is equipped to survive without a spirit. To some extent, this acts as a justification to the flawed logic that humankind is the only animal to have a spirit. Indeed, we further enhance our own importance by stating we were made in the likeness of God, that we are a replica of a force we cannot even conceive. Well, the Abrahamic religions teach this with the concept of creation in 7 days. Albeit we know man first walked on this world in a different image to this over 50 billion years ago. In fact, I can't go to even further than that. And everybody came from the same area. Genetically, we're all connected. However, the concept of spirit is not a shape, it is an energy force. Clearly, when our loved ones communicate, they project a familiar body and known energies, but it is unlikely that is the form they take in the spirit realms. What role does this spiritual essence have in our life? How does it impact on our physical actions and the life we live? I'll be completely honest, I've got no real idea. Being man, I can intellectualize it and hypothesize. Like a good human being, I can come up with a rational and plausible idea to try and explain any concept, a concept like that. However, this creates a theology, an attempt by man to place into words the inexplicable, to take a position and justify it with a series of explanations which allow it to fit within my personal belief system. The ideas I mentioned above about reincarnation and new souls, we have no evidential proof to create a truth, so we create intellectual explanations to justify our views. We create new intellectual property for ourselves to join all the theologies of established religions. Like formal religions, these positions become immutably fixed, incapable of further development. Yet in each case, we look for a way in which something occurs and what we believe is the course of events. We do not really look at what spirit is or is not. We may hypothesize and all too frequently do so. We look at others' lives to try and form a picture of what spirit is, but the patterns are flawed. There are many living eminently good lives from harsh backgrounds, while some others can privilege do the opposite. There's no common logic to those people who behave well. I believe while we have a physical life, this will be one of the puzzles we face. Mahatma Gandhi said about God, something that seems to hold good for my view of the divine and our spiritual nature. He said this: there is an indefinable, mysterious power that pervades everything. I feel it, though I do not see it. It is this unseen power which makes itself felt and yet defies all proof, which is so unlike all that I perceive through my senses. It transcends the senses, but it is possible to reason out the existence of God to a limited extent. I do dimly perceive that whilst everything around me is ever changing, ever dying, there is underlying all that change a living power that is changeless, that holds all together, that creates, dissolves and recreates. That informing power or spirit is God. Since nothing else I see merely through the senses can or will persist, He alone is. And is this power benevolent or malevolent? I see it as purely benevolent, for I can see that in the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists. In the midst of darkness, light persists. Hence I gather that God is life, truth, light. He is love. He is the supreme good. I confess I have no argument to convince through reason. Faith transcends reason. All I can advise is not to attempt the impossible. I cannot account for the existence of evil by any rational method. To want to do so is to be co-equal with God. I am therefore humble enough to recognize evil as such, and I call God long-suffering and patient precisely because he commits evil in the world. I know that he has no evil in him, and yet there is evil. He is the author of it, and yet untouched by it. I know, too, that I shall never know of God if I do not wrestle with him against evil, even at the cost of life itself. I am fortified in the belief by my own humble and limited experience. The purer I try to become, the nearer to God I feel myself to be. How much more should I be near to him when my faith is not mere apology as it is today, but has become as movable as the Himalayas and as white and bright as the snows on their peaks? I think it was one of the most powerful things I've seen from or read from Mahatma Gandhi. I can't explain God, but I think he gets about as close as I can get to having an idea of it. If I now take what's said with the concepts of spiritualism, I see one true value of the knowledge of spirit. It is to lead us to reach for the God within us. Maybe that is the point. The spirit is found within us by accepting the benevolence of this indefinable force of his God and expressing it to others. This does not require intellectual thought, it requires feeling. This more clearly fits our version of spiritualism as I see it. Indeed, maybe it suggests an alternative view to the time when the spirit enters our body. Maybe it is when we use the wonderful gift, the physical body with all of its abilities, to reach beyond the nature of the physical, to realize the potential of our spirit. I'll read that with you.
Actually, there's so many thoughts that go through my mind about that. I'm not going to say anything about